2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 10. I told you before that I've noticed that as I get near the 40s, I struggle reading, but I refuse to wear glasses. I'm going to stay young. Just kidding. Just kidding. Right? Okay, now you make me feel old. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. You see, I can't even find it. Can't even see it. So on the screen already. Okay, 2 Corinthians chapter 12. You have it? Pastor, that was a bad joke. Chapter 12, verse 10. Therefore, I take pleasure. I enjoy. Therefore, I enjoy. Now, it says here, infirmities. But just in previous verses, it says weaknesses. It's the same word, weaknesses. Yes? So therefore, I take pleasure in weaknesses. You like being weak? He's taking pleasure in being weak, in reproaches. Who in here loves it when they don't have enough? When you lack, you love it? Lord, I am so grateful that I lack today. I don't have enough. Thank you for the needs in my life. In persecutions. You see, we complain about here in America that we're persecuted as Christians. We don't know what persecution is like. We don't know what it is like. In distresses, for Christ's sake, for when I am weak, then I am strong. So, in this last season, I have come across a message that I believe is, at least in my heart, is fresh and it is full of hope. This message has made me cry several times since I've come across it. And it's a message that helps me deal with the weaknesses, the needs, the distresses. It helps me deal with my inadequacies. Anybody in here feels inadequate? You look at what God has in store for you, the promises, the plans, the purpose of God over your life, and then you see yourself and you see inadequacies in there. Things that will keep you from allowing God to do what He said He would do in your life. And so I find this message that I'm sharing with you today that has helped me deal with those things, because I don't only have external limitations, which I have. I am limited by things that are beyond what I can do inside of me. But there are also things inside of me that keep me, or that play against what God wants to do in my life. We call those tendencies, mainly negative tendencies. See, those things are inside of you. They're not external things. They're things that you deal with you in the inside, right? And so all of these things makes us doubt God, whether if God is going to be able to do what He said He would do. Looking at all my limitations, my negative tendencies, it makes us doubt if God really will do what He said He will do in my life. We don't doubt the power of God. We don't doubt how amazing and how wonderful He is. Our doubt comes from seeing ourselves. Just like that man that approached Jesus and said, I believe you're powerful. I believe you can heal. I believe you've done miracles. But help my unbelief. What does that mean? Well, I believe that you can do it. I'm just not so sure that you will do it for me. I mean, look at me. So this message has helped me deal with those things, because as we doubt, as we struggle with this, chances are that we have a possibility of delaying God's promises or blessings over our lives. So this has created a conflict in me. Now, this message, I know that you're familiar with it by now. It's Ehud. I love this story of Ehud. Judges chapter 3. I mean, I don't know how come Ehud is not heard of as much as David. I know that David was wonderful. But when it comes to David defeating Goliath and how Ehud set the people of Israel free from bondage, it was as powerful. That moment right there, that fight right there was as powerful. It was very amazing to me how Ehud did that. But the message behind it, how the Bible describes Ehud as being a left-handed man, that has a wonderful message. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Because being a left-handed man meant he had a disadvantage, meant that he was rejected by culture, and because of the kind of culture that he lived in, was rejected by God. I mean, there were a lot of things that today we don't have to worry about. Things that the people of Israel consider impurities, that separated you from God, that we don't have to worry about today. Now, that was in the same line as those. Any birth defects that people would have would be considered as God has rejected you. You're not as good as you could be. So he had a lot of things going against him, right? To begin with, he could not be part of the army. There were not weapons made for people that were left-handed. So all of those things were against him, which set the stage to say this, that the things that you call disadvantage over your life, in this story, in the case of Ehud, was the very same thing that allowed him to execute the mission that God had given him. So I love that message because I have believed that I am a left-handed man. I believe that there are disadvantages in my life. I believe that there are things in me that I don't like about myself that according to the world that we live in, separate me from God, push me away from who God is. I believe that by the standards of the world, I would not be a pastor today. And yet, God needed a left-handed man. God needed a lefty. Yes? So, this message, I believe, is amazing. And I want you to understand this message because I believe I'm looking at a congregation full of lefties. Any lefties here? Meaning we have disadvantages. We have things we don't like about ourselves. We often say, why am I the way that I am? When I make my wife upset, that I know it was my fault, and I find myself questioning, like, I don't do it to make her upset. I don't do it on purpose. I don't want her to feel bad. I don't want to hurt her. I never do. And yet sometimes we do. So when I do those things, I find myself upset, mad, and I find myself questioning, why is it that I am the way that I am? And so the story of Ehud gives me hope. Gives me hope to think that maybe I am the way that I am because God has one specific purpose that was designed for one lefty like me. And so I want you to hear this message, and it is important that you understand this concept that I'm sharing with you. Because we humans, fortunately or unfortunately, we humans need truths to build upon. We need truths. That's how everything is built. Everything around you is based on truths. It's built from truths. I don't know if this is making sense, but when we adopt something as truth, when you hear a concept, when you hear an idea, when you hear something that somebody else said, and you hear it, and you adopt it as truth, it will influence the way that you live. It will influence how you talk, what you do, where you go, and how you do things. That's why you need to be careful on who you listen to, what you're listening to, the kind of friends that you have. You need to be aware that when you adopt ideas as truth, they change you. They modify your behavior. If you think, or if you hear that someone says, you're funny, right? And if you adopt it as true, you will become a joker. You will try to make everyone laugh. You see, my 6-year-old, almost 7-year-old, when he tries to be funny and we laugh, guess what he does? He milks that same joke for a week. The same thing. Daddy, remember? Remember how that went? And we're laughing every single time. So he thinks it's jokes, sir. And he jokes and he jokes and he tries to be funny. Guess what? He adopted as truth. He thought he was funny. So he adopted it and he modified his behavior. He pushed him in that direction. Really? What you adopt as truth modifies your behavior. Do you think that sexual orientation has anything to do with that, what I just said? Or is connected to what I'm saying? Yes. That is why so many people come out and say, I am this, I am that, because they adopt an idea as truth and it starts modifying their behavior. Before it was a truth in their mind, they fought it. It didn't modify their behavior. It was something there. They were wrestling with it. But what is if this is not true? What if it's that? But the moment they say this is true, that moment they're letting go. That now it's modifying their behavior. That's how we're designed. We need truths to build upon. You see, in order to build a happy marriage, I need some truths in my marriage. For instance, I need a truth that says that my wife is crazy in love with me. That in her eyes there is no more handsomer. Handsomer, did I say it right? More handsome. Thank you. You know what? I didn't stop at handsome. It was more than handsome. It was a little bit farther than just handsome. So in order for me to have a stable marriage, I need one truth. And I need that to be truth. And then I can build upon that. I need to build on the fact that she loves me. If I have that as a truth, I can do other things. If I have that as a truth, when she says something that hurts me, I will have something that I have been building on. So I'll have this thing that she said on a powerful truth that I have. So you see how truth is important now. And we build on that truth. If I believe that she sees me as the handsomest, then I can be comfortable and I can be fine. But if I don't have that truth, every time she smiles at somebody else, it's going to eat me alive. I wonder if she's flirting with somebody else. I wonder if she's talking with somebody else instead of loving me and just having her eyes fixed on me. You see how that truth is so important? Because I will not have peace in my life until I am certain that she loves me. Yes. Truths are something that we need so that we can build upon. They become the foundation of everything that we build. You see, what you do at church because you're building upon a truth. You give of your time, resources, finances, because you believe that there is a living God. That is your truth, and that living God has placed a responsibility upon your life to give of yourself. And so because of that, you do things. It modifies your behavior. You come to church every Sunday. You come to church on Wednesdays because you believe that God wants you to be active, interacting with His purpose over your life. We need truth to build upon. You see, as a pastor, everything that I do, the time that I invest, the reading, the research, all of those things are built upon a truth that I believe God has called me and given me a message to be a blessing to others, to inspire, to restore, to help heal, to do all the things that I believe God has called me to do. So we need truths to be able to do what we do. But this truths also, work inversely, in the opposite way. You see, you can take a truth from God and build upon that the same way that you can take a truth from the enemy, which are distorted truths. And then you can build upon that. And it will modify you the same way. It will change what you do and how you do what you do. It'll affect you. You see, when a son hears, you will never amount to anything. If this son dares to build upon that truth, he will exactly not amount to anything. Precisely not amount to anything. When a girl hears, no one will ever love you, from mom or dad. When a girl hears, you're ugly, no one will marry you. When a girl hears that and adopts that as truth, guess what happens? With the first guy that says, I love you, she's all in. She gives it all. Because she's building upon a truth that was not truth. And so all of her behavior is affected by that one truth that she adopted. I'm not saying it's truth. I'm just saying you made it truth when you adopted it as truth. And then you modified everything about you. Your standards dropped. Why is the opposite? If a dad says, you're so beautiful, so special, I'm telling you, I don't know that there is a boy out there that deserves you. I mean, you deserve the best, and you're preparing her for that. She will have high standards, and she will not settle for just about anyone. So these truths are important for us. We build upon them. The problem is that oftentimes we build on things that are not necessarily of God. And we build upon them as if they were of God. And we do our entire life on those things. We based our life on those truths or distorted truths from the enemy. So truths in our hearts play a huge role on how we build and what we build, what we do with our lives. So I want you to deal with these universal truths as we move with this message. Here are two universal truths that we're going to deal with throughout this message. Number one, here's one truth that we have all acted upon this. We have all built upon this truth. And this is the first truth, that there are things in us that are inherently wrong. We built upon this truth that there are things in you and in me that are wrong. From the day that you were born, we are born with things that are wrong with us. It's a truth that we built upon. Early in your life, you realize that there is something wrong with you. I don't know when was the first time or how young you were when you realized, wow, I can be mean. I can be rude. I can hurt somebody. I don't know if you had a moment where you thought to yourself, how in the world could those thoughts be in my head? They're horrible. How would I say that? Why would I say that? Why would I think that? So we're building on this idea that there are things inherently wrong with us, that they're part of us, that there is something in us that is wrong. Somehow, we gravitate to those things because you don't have to put effort into doing wrong. We do that very easily. It's doing right that we need to put effort into. So, we're building on this. We hurt others. We know that we can. We say things that we shouldn't say. We all do. I wish I could tell you as a pastor, I've never said things that I went back and said I shouldn't have said that. Things that I go back and I'm embarrassed. I was talking to Fred Wagner. I don't know if you remember him. Was the vice president of Johnson & Johnson. We interviewed him here. So he's a really good friend of mine. So if I have something that I need help, I will give him a call and ask for advice. I was thinking about doing electrical panels in my house on the roof. I gave him a call to see what he thought. And so every time I have something like that, I give him a call. And so we're talking about finances and everything. And I forgot exactly what he asked. And that said something, no, I don't do that because I'm smart. And immediately, as I said that, I'm like, oh God. How is it that I said that? I felt so bad. I was embarrassed. How can a pastor say, I am so smart, that's why I don't fall for that, or that's why I don't do that, or that's why I've never do that, when the right word would be, I am so blessed. I am privileged that God has done this and done that. You see how easy it is for us to do wrong? And the same way that many times you're having a conversation and then you just say something and it hurts the other person. You didn't mean to hurt them. It just came out. And it makes you wonder, what's really inside of you. How bad can it be? I've heard that the reason why, this is a philosopher, The reason why we haven't had another Hitler is not because we haven't had another person with the right intentions in their hearts or desires, but it was because we haven't had another that kind of leader, because he took skill and wisdom and knowledge to be able to do what he did at that scale. That means that given the right circumstances, each one of us can do wrong. And so this is one idea that we build upon, because we know that we are born with tendencies. There are things in us that continue to pull us in the wrong direction. There are things in us that if we let them, will continue to bring shame into our lives. So one of the truths that we deal with is that there are things in us that are inherently wrong. Every one of us. Here's the second truth that we build upon, is that we were created by God. You build upon that truth? That you were created by God. Now there is a gap in here. There is something missing here. And I believe that the passage of Paul that we just read deals with that gap in there. Because if you notice, there is something missing here. On the one side, you have that there's something inherently wrong in us. Something broken, something damaged in us. And then on the other side, the other truth that we deal with is that we were created by God. There is something missing there. It is almost as when you read Genesis 1, verse 1 and verse 2. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? Verse 1. And then the next verse, the English version, I believe, says the earth was void, right? Vacant, void. But the Spanish says it was out of order, which is the right translation. We know it was written in Spanish. So it says it was out of order. How can God, as perfect and as amazing and wonderful and loving and kind as He is, can create something, and as you read how it was out of order? So does that mean that God creates something like you and me and creates it broken or damaged? Because on the one side, we're building on the fact that there is something wrong with us. And we cannot say, no, there is nothing wrong with us, when you have thoughts that even yourself recognize as evil. So we know that there is something wrong with us. Every one of us, there is something wrong in us. And then on the other side, how can we say we were created by God? Because there is a conflict there. We know that God is perfect. How can a perfect God create someone so imperfect like me? Or is it that He made a mistake? Maybe He did as best as He could. And with some of us, He went too far. Maybe it was that He created some people. It was early in the morning. He was energized. He was excited. He was motivated. And then by midnight, He was creating me. It's like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to make this all the way on. That'll do. We'll fix it in the way. You think that's how God does things? So we have a conflict here. God created everything. He created you. It seems that this was somewhat of an oxymoron. Yes? I was created by design by a God that doesn't make mistakes. And yet, I sometimes feel broken. And I don't mean hurt. I mean broken in the sense that there is something wrong with me. I feel damaged. How can we deal with this? How can God create someone that is capable of horrible thoughts? Have you experienced horrible feelings, thoughts, emotions? I have. How can God create someone with such tendencies? I was on the highway one day. I was driving a small car in an 18-wheeler. Didn't notice I was there. It started going into my lane. And I felt him, and I started honking and hit the gas a little bit, but he actually hit me. And so I didn't know how big it was. And I started making signs, hey, you hit me. And he was ignoring me. I knew he saw what he did, but he was ignoring me. I was upset. I forgot I was a pastor. I followed him. I got in front of him, and then I realized I was crazy. What if this guy was crazy? And when he got down, he wanted to fight with me. So I finally got him to stop. And when he looked at the car, he just said, well, too bad, whatever. I mean, he didn't say that, but that's actually what happened. And so I had to make a decision. I either get into a fight with this guy or deal with the issue myself. And as strong as you see me, and as you know that I've been going to the gym for a little bit, I decided to let it go. I was like, you know what? It's not worth it. Yes, he was bigger than me, so it was probably a smart decision from my behalf. But anyways, you see, there are moments in our lives where we get into a point where it's very easy for us to lose what we are and to get into a place that will bring shame into our lives. So there are things in us that are wrong, broken, damaged, whatever you want to call it. And I get it, that some of these things are there because of the circumstances in which you were born. I told you just a minute ago that circumstances do influence our behavior, right? And I said, given the circumstances, we probably would do wrong if we're not careful. So the question is then, will circumstances pull something that doesn't exist out of you? Or will circumstances merely bring to surface what's already in you? The reality is that as much as circumstances do influence in our lives so that we go in one path or another, because it's not the same to be born in a Christian home with parents that love God and honor God. It's not the same to be born in that place than to be born in a place where there is drug addiction and alcohol and all of the evil things that you can think of. It's not the same life. As a child, you will not have the same issues and circumstances. Now, having said that, it is a reality that the circumstances can only pull what's already inside of us. Will only bring to surface what's already there. That means that we are born with tendencies in us. Tendencies. Things that make us go in the wrong direction. Are you with me? But still, doesn't make sense. God doesn't make mistakes. Why would He put those things in there? And so, we have plenty of time. I was scared. So I want to go over this aspect of our lives. In this story, I noticed there are three things that seem to jump at me. I believe Paul, the story of Paul, this is Paul dealing with God. And let's go ahead and read it. That way we can just say it exactly how it is. Verse 7, same chapter, verse 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. You have it? At least I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations. This was a big guy. No, he was not just anybody. A thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I'd be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing, I've pleaded with the Lord 3 times that He might depart from me. I've begged, I've asked God. And He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly, I would rather boast in my infirmities, weaknesses, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. And this is the verse that we opened with. So this is because of what he just said. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. We'll stop right there. There is something in here, and I want us to look at, because I believe that this is connected with the story of Ehud. It's the same thing, just presented in a different way. So we have been operating, our life has been operated under the truth that we are broken. There is something wrong with us. Even, and I'm going to say this very carefully, even after we have been redeemed. Okay? I'm not saying that we're lost. I am saying that there is something wrong with us. And I know that we can do all things through Christ. I know that we have been transformed, that He is sanctifying us. I know all of that. What I'm saying is that I've been a Christian for a long time. I've been a pastor for 7-8 years. And yet I find myself rebuking thoughts. I'm like, how in the world? Those things are still there. Am I broken, God? Is there something wrong with me? Why would you think of someone like me to be a pastor, to give me such a big responsibility? And yet I feel like I'm broken. Something's wrong with me. But just about a year or year and a half ago, I felt like there was hope. That hearing about Ehud and how God needed someone as exactly as he was, with the weaknesses that he had, the disadvantages that he had. And now I can relate and maybe think that even though I have things that I hate about myself, things that are not pleasing to God, that I know exist in me, maybe there is hope that I can still fulfill the purpose that God created me for, that I can still bring glory to His name, that He can still be worshiped because of how instrumental I can become, or the instrument that I can become in His hands. So, I want you to have a new truth today. Because you have been operating under the truth that is not from God. What am I saying is not from God? That you are broken, damaged, that there is something inherently wrong with you. There is nothing inherently wrong with you. What? Pastor, you just spent all this time saying as there is, and now you're saying there is not. Listen, I am not saying that there are not negative tendencies in you. I am not saying that they're not real. They are real. They're very real. They're there. I am not saying that your proclivities to do wrong are not there. They're there. Trust me, we know. We've seen some of them. They're there. They're very real. What this simply means is that you're not broken. Just because you have negative tendencies and proclivities to do wrong, it doesn't mean that you are broken or damaged. It doesn't mean that. It means that you're a lefty. And when God needs someone to do a mission for Him, we come to Him and say, Lord, are you sure you want me? Because as far as I remember, I'm a lefty. And He said, I need a lefty. I don't know if you could hear it. Did you hear it? You could hear it. I need a lefty. That's what He says. I need a lefty. This is the truth. Okay? Please take this truth with you today. Build upon this. You are perfect for God's purpose. You are perfect for God's purpose. There is nothing in your life that means you're broken. You are perfect for God's purpose. Everything about you, even the things that you don't like, even the things that you hate about yourself, even the things that you're still struggling with, everything about you makes you perfect for the purpose of God over your life. Everything about you makes you perfect. Let me go a little faster. I want to point out the 3 things that I mentioned that I find in this story, because in this passage particularly, I find a wonderful interaction between a perfect God and an imperfect person. Now, I love how this interaction, or the interaction between the elements in this story, show us a powerful outcome that is possible for you and for me. So let me mention the 3 elements that I find are key in this story. Number 1, there is a thorn. there is a thorn. Number 2, there is grace. And number 3, there is power. We'll call that the outcome. There is a thorn. Number 2, what was it? Grace. And number 3, power. There are 3 things. Let's go one by one, and I'll make emphasis for about 10 minutes on the thorn. So thorn, this is a weakness, tendencies, disadvantages, difficulties, sickness, struggles, things that make life difficult, painful, uncomfortable, all those things. Now, in this case, it wasn't disclosed. It doesn't say what it was. It was kept a secret on purpose so that you can put your name there, so that it could be your thorn. It's not one thing that you can judge against and say, well, I'm not that way, so that's not for me. No, it's open. It's yours. It's your thorn. It's open. It's what you have. So that's one. That's the first element. The second one is grace. Don't you love grace? Now, I don't know if you love this grace right here. I know that you love grace, but in this case, in this passage, in this message, for this series, grace doesn't give you what you want. Because normally we think of grace as unmerited favor. That means I get what I didn't work for. I get what I don't deserve. That's amazing because I'll have what I want without paying the price for it. That's not what this is. That's not this grace right here. Because this grace is a grace that does something for you but doesn't give you what you asked for. In this context, everything but the removal of the thorn is grace. There's no removal of the thorn. It's yours to keep, honey. You gotta love that kind of grace from God. You think there is something wrong with you, something that is hurting you, something that is painful in your life, and you come begging God to remove it from you, and He says, here is my grace. And you think that means the removal of the thorn, and no, it doesn't. He says, here is my grace, but let me finish my statement. Here is my grace. It is sufficient for you. So don't ask me to remove that. And number 3, power. That's fullness. Which, I don't know if by accident or not, but in here we have a formula. Thorn plus grace equals power. Thorn, disadvantage, difficulties, negative tendencies, proclivities to do wrong. All of those things that you bring to the Lord and say, Lord, please remove them from me. It keeps me from serving you the way that I would want to serve you if I didn't have that. Lord, if I didn't have these negative tendencies, I would go all over the world and preach your word. Your thorn. Plus, so it's not removing it. It's there and it's going to stay there. We're keeping it. Plus, grace equals power. Power, power, power. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? That as broken as we think we are, as damaged as we think we are, is not true? All we need is His grace. And the limitations in your life, the disadvantages in your life, the negative proclivities in your life, all of those things, all they need is the grace of the King of Kings. And there will be power in your life. So let me just close this message for the next 30 minutes with 3 things I want to share with you. Just something about this thorn really quickly. Number 1, verse 7, please, if you put it up there. Paul is saying, I am so good at what I do. I have such a connection with God. No one touches me. I am the coolest that you can think of. That's me. So that doesn't get to my head, a thorn was given to me. That's what that's saying. Look at what he says. The abundance of the revelations. He's no insignificant man. He's seen some things. He's heard some things. He's done some things. He knows where he's standing. He knows who he is in the kingdom of God. So he understands that so well that he recognizes the benefit of the thorn. Now, I love the language that is used in this passage. It says, And least I should not be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations. A thorn in the flesh was what? Given. Given. Given sounds on purpose. It's not on accident. It was given on purpose. Yes, it was given to you. Because you may think, well, I'm this way because my parents did that to me. I have this thorn because my mom, because my dad. I have this because... No, honey. That's not how it works. Because even though, listen to this, even though it says a messenger of Satan to buffet me, you know where this message is coming from. Satan is only delivering it. But the one that sent that message was God. And he knows it. Paul knows that this message is from God. The message of this thorn is a good thing. It's saying, I love you so much that I want to make sure that you don't lose your head over these revelations that you have. That I love you so much and I don't want you to lose your head, that I will give you something that will keep you grounded. Now, Pastor, that's very, very uncomfortable to talk about. The things that make your life difficult were given by God. Is that what you're saying, Pastor? Be careful, because it seems rather a difficult thing to bear. Listen to what we're saying. The things that are painful in our lives were given by God. Because you can say that is the enemy that has done that in your life. But Paul is so wise that he sees beyond I'm not saying the enemy was not the one that did it. But what Paul is saying is that the enemy is a minion of God. He's a minion of God. If God finds purpose in the enemy stealing something from you, taking something from you, God will allow it. At that point, I say God did it. Because he could have stopped it and he didn't. He allowed the enemy to do that. He allowed the enemy to take that from me and cause pain in my life. He allowed the enemy to do those things that now make my life impossible. That I now have to deal with excruciating pain. So, this thorn of yours was given to you. And I'll be honest. There are some things I don't have an answer to. As we speak right now, I'm still chewing on this revelation. How can God give me pain? That's tough to answer. Pastor, how dare you say something good will come out of this pain that kills my life? I don't have the answer. I can't. So I'm not going to say how, because I don't know. But all I can tell you is that the thorn was given. As painful as it is, it was given. How can God put something in me that will trip me later? Because you're not an accident. There are tendencies in us that make it harder to serve God, that make it difficult. And we all have different things. And God put them there. How can God would call me to do something and then make it difficult for me to do it? I don't have the answer to some of those things. All I know is that the thorn was given. And Paul knew that it was not just given, but that it had a purpose. And I'm going to go as fast as I can. I got 2 minutes. As fast as I can. Your thorn exists for a purpose. Listen, in the case of Ehud, what made his life difficult was the very thing that allowed him to execute the mission of God. Meaning, his disadvantages, like David. The disadvantages that David had against Goliath were the key to David succeeding against Goliath. If David wanted to be like Goliath and be head-to-head with the armor, attack the same way that he would do it, guess what would have happened to David? He would have lost. But it was in embracing who he was and the disadvantages that he had that he was able to conquer. Same thing with Ehud. I, for a long time, complained about my lack of pastoral training. I complained to myself, not realizing that that very lack allowed me to have a fresh perspective on things, not influenced by traditional teachings. And you see, now all of a sudden, a disadvantage that I thought I had became the key to be successful at what God has in store for me. Because of the thorn, you and me, because of being left-handed, now we may have a possibility. Listen, because of the thorn, in the case of Ehud, he had to be creative. There were no weapons made for left-handed people. He had to make his own. Because of the thorn, we have limitations, right? But when you have limitations, it doesn't mean that you're not able to do it. It means that you have to do it differently. You have limitations. You have things against you. It doesn't mean that you can't. It just means that you have to do it differently than others. The difficulties, it doesn't mean that you can't. It just means you have to work harder. Try again and again and again and again. When you have disadvantages, it doesn't mean that you can't. It means that you have to compensate. You have to work harder in other areas to compensate for those. Now, in the case of Paul, it was a little different. The thorn had a different purpose. For Ehud was to providing the key to succeed over there. In the case of Paul, was to hold them down a little bit. Paul was someone important. Paul was smart. He was educated. He was disciplined. He was focused. He had clear vision. He was hardworking. He was committed. He was a writer. He was a thinker. He was a philosopher. He was all these amazing things. He was not a left-handed. He had a powerful right hand. Do you know that the Jewish people, blame Paul and not Jesus for Christianity? Because Jesus was the teacher, but he only had 12 disciples. You know who carried the rest? Paul. How many letters? A bunch. Most of our doctrine comes from who? Paul. So, he was right-handed. And now God needed to make sure that he would not lose him right here. He needed to keep him humble. I believe that sometimes we have things in us to keep us humble. To remind us, you're not all that. I believe that God has a funny way to remind us. Sometimes he uses marriage. Well, I thought that would be funny, but I guess not. I will save that for the conference. I want to invite you. Marriage conference, February, the last 2 Saturdays. I will confirm this, but please make plans for February. We're going to have our marriage conference. Amen? All right, I'm finished. I just want to tell you really quickly. Please don't be discouraged. You're not broken. You're not damaged. If there are things in you that you think are wrong with you, I get it. The feeling is justified by what you see and how you feel. I get it. But it doesn't mean that you are broken. It means that you're perfect for the purpose of God over your life. I don't know how God will utilize painful experiences, negative tendencies, all of those things. But I know that you are perfect. So instead of fighting against these things, I'm not saying embrace them. I'm saying bring them to the Lord. Lord, help me understand how this negative tendency that I have will bring honor to you. It might be that he's trying to keep you humble. Or it might be that in that tendency, by you compensating against that, you will find a tremendous gift in a different area. Without that, you wouldn't have found that. So, God placed it there to create dependency on us for him. We depend on him every day of our lives. He allowed those things to be there to make us alert, to know that we can fail. If you have something in you and you know which inclination you have, you will be alert. You will know not to do certain things, not to go somewhere, not to participate or this or that.